it like really breaks my heart, and it really should break other people's heart, that we see adopted children, you know, thriving and living great lives, but we don't really take into perspective that's a loss for somebody. That was somebody's child that they couldn't take care of, and now luckily they're in a place where they can be taken care of, but it shouldn't have had to have been that. I don't know. My name's Seneca. Welcome to my casual channel. This is where I talk anything casual or monumental in relation to life and life's events. And today I just wanted to talk about adoption, because as an adoptee, I have had several experiences, opinions, ever-changing thoughts on the idea of adoption as I was adopted from the time that I was a couple months old to now being 24. So I have made a bunch of videos on adoption. I recount my adoption story in the podcast episode when I had a podcast, if you want to listen to that. I have different videos on adoption and my feelings about adoption. I had my first ever empathetic thought for my birth mother I think it was maybe like a couple months ago, or maybe it was a year ago. So basically the idea of adoption to me is something I am always thinking about, and it is always changing or being tweaked the older that I get. I'm making this video titled Adoption Sucks. I'm very privileged to say that, like, where my life has ended up is a great place. Not every person who's been through the adoption system can say that. And I find that a lot of people adopted, or like somebody who just knows about the adoption system, can confidently say that adoption sucks despite a lot of the benefits that it provides. It's nerve-wracking to even throw up such a large statement such as adoption sucks, because in talking about adoption in the past, I feel as though there are people dedicated to disagreeing with me, because the minute that you say something about adoption, people go to what they know, which is what has been co-opted in the media, which is the simple stories of like success in adoption, and not really the kind of like horrors and realism of what adoption can be and has been. There's so many things, so many statements people make about like things sucking that you can also see benefits from. Like we say like school sucks. Like sometimes school does suck, but it brings us ultimately a better education and sometimes better lives. We could say like certain people suck, but also recognize that they have certain benefits in life. We could say, I don't know, there's a lot of things that like we say blankly that suck, but people don't come at us and are like, well, you think that school sucks? Well, aren't you happy that now you know what 1 + 1 is? Like, I find that with adoption, there's always like some pushback with some people that say like, well, don't you want to be toxically, positively optimistic about your experience, even though you have negative things to say about it? Like, I want people to recognize, I'm saying adoption sucks because there are a lot of negatives to adoption that like people aren't really willing to take into consideration, but it's like, I think that adoption sucks because at the core of why I was adopted is because I was rejected from a family that could not take care of me, and I will never know why. And the thing is, if I want to know why, I have to seek that out. So automatically, adoption just is traumatic. Like, even if you have the most perfect upbringing, if you have the most perfect people who adopted you, if your life is perfect, there still is a flaw with the idea that like one family has now become into two, and even though you're like a great factor to a family who hopefully like wanted you and made their family a little bit more whole, there still is like flaws and cracks in the original family that could not keep you for whatever reason. And it's really hard because I think as a 20-year-old, like I said, I had my first ever empathetic thought for my birth mother, and I'll list the video below about why I'm grateful for my birth mother, and like how I turned my birth mother from being like a villain in my head to just somebody who I truly wish the best for and have a lot of empathy for and cry for. But it sucks because like that's how your life starts. Your life starts because you could not be put into your original family. I was gonna say your family of origin, but yeah, you couldn't be with your family of origin for reasons either known or unknown to you. And that's really hard to grapple with as a human being. And as much as it is great that you could end up in another situation, I think that a lot of people who are not adopted also don't realize that a lot of the time the adoption system is like really not perfect. It has a lot of flaws with a lot of other systems. Every system has flaws. But it's especially hard because when you even bring up the idea of adoption, like I'll have met a new friend. I'll say that I'm adopted, and people will say, "Oh, that's so cool. Oh my gosh, that's so great. Aren't you so grateful for your parents?" It's like, why would you automatically just assume my parents are like the best people on earth, or like people who like know me or barely know me will say the same things about how great it is that I'm adopted without even knowing my family at all. My parents could be like horribly like abusive. My parents could have adopted me for wrong reasons, and that happens all the time. It's even, I joined this group on Facebook that talked about the realism of why adoption is just horrible. And there's a lot, I didn't know that I could find so many individuals with similar feelings to mine, but then also very extreme feelings towards adoption, because we've had bad experiences, not only like socially, but like in our adopted families as well. Because it just doesn't it isn't really talked about, it isn't really exposed. One thing, I was gonna bring up another thing I'm gonna bring up later. What sucks is that when you do bring up feelings of natural grief or loss, because you lost your family of origin, that's what you lost a family of origin, yay, you gained a new family, it doesn't negate the fact that like you could have had your family of origin, but for some unforeseen reason they can't take care of you. That is in itself why adoption at its core to me sucks, because it's like, I almost don't want to say this. My camera cut off, but I think I was saying that I almost don't want to say this. Adoption at its core is traumatic because it is born from loss, and I would hope that we could all be pro family. What is the word? It's where you're pro, without having to lose a child and having to give it up to either a foster system or a family. Luckily, there are families that do want children that cannot have children, and I'm talking like for every single circumstance. Luckily, there are those people in the world that have gained families, and that's like such a great benefit of adoption. But I don't feel like we really properly dig into the fact that it is so incredibly traumatic to probably, I don't know, I just can only guess, to lose a child that you are not prepared to have. It like really breaks my heart, and it really should break other people's heart, that we see adopted children, thriving and living great lives, but we don't really take into perspective that's a loss for somebody. That was somebody's child that they couldn't take care of, and now luckily they're in a place where they can be taken care of, but it shouldn't have had to have been that. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying with that. I feel like in any way, me saying that adoption really shouldn't exist because of the loss is like very controversial, because there's been so many benefits. Like I'm a result of the benefit that it has caused, but it just really sucks. At its core, it sucks because it's like based in loss. Another thing that I really think sucks about adoption is simply the reaction that I have from other people, especially people who always make it known that they have always wanted to adopt. I find that people, not every single person that I have talked to and they say, oh, I've always wanted to adopt, is ignorant, but I feel like for the most part, people who say I've always wanted to adopt want to adopt because of like a fake, or not a fake, an overly idealistic idea in their head about what adoption is versus what it really is. Really hard to describe as an adoptee, like mentally, the effects that being adopted has had on me, but one statistic, you can look this up and confirm, is that adoptees, I think, are like 4 times more likely to attempt suicide. That's really that's really impactful. Adoptees mentally all have core, I think there's like 7 core themes, seven core themes of what ties adoptees together, and it's all rooted in like feelings of loss, instability. I forget what the themes are. Maybe I'll like list them. But since it's based off loss, it's kind of hard for me to like support or affirm people who say like, oh, I always wanted to adopt, with like a good for you, you're like saving the world, look at you. Because it really feels like, okay, if you've always wanted to adopt, like, tell me something about adoption that's like real, you know? I feel like when people say like, oh, I always wanted to adopt, I've always wanted to give children home, like I want to do this, it's like, okay, you want to do it because you want to feel like a good person, you want to be a good person, you have this idea about adoption that maybe is real, maybe you're educated, but for the most part it's like, okay, name like the 7 different types of adoptions there are, name if you want to open or closed adoption, are you willing to take in somebody who's 4 times more likely to attempt suicide into your home? Are you? Because I feel as though people are very quick to say, I want to adopt, I've always wanted to adopt, I want to give a child a home, and don't recognize, at least when people are in front of me especially, I'm like, so you're saying that you've always wanted to adopt and you're like not asking like an adoptee like any like specific deep questions? That's typically what happens in my experience. Is somebody will say, I always wanted to adopt, they'll go on a tangent about why they always wanted to adopt, they're like, I just feel like I've always wanted to give a child a home, and then it's like, a lot of us have really horrible mental problems, abandonment issues like crazy. One of my friends has been one of the statistics. I don't know, and also the people that tend to adopt, actually I can't even make that broad of a statement about people who tend to adopt because there's such a broad spectrum of people. But when it comes to transracial adoptees, when people throw out statements like, oh, like the one of my friends in college who said, I want to adopt a child from every single race. It's like, why would you want to do that? I feel like there's like a pipeline between people who are colorblind and people who like adopt overseas. Such a strong pipeline that does not make any sense, because I've been in conversations with one of my friend's parents who said, oh, we don't see color, yet they have 2 Asian American children who came from Asia. What? You say I don't see color? You yourself plopped yourself from America into a plane to go outside of America for Chinese-born children, came back and told another adoptee we don't see color. What country were you in then? Like, the thing is, like, I understand people's ignorance. It's like sucks because as an adoptee, I feel like people don't give us the credit of like just being socially very aware of dynamics. Like the people who say like I don't see color, I understand optimistically you would want to treat people simply as equals, like you don't want to treat somebody of one race better than another. I get that sentiment, but it's also kind of like you don't negate their experience, don't negate what they're going through in relation to people who potentially could discriminate against them or make them feel like they're othered, you know? That's just like when people say like, oh, well, you shouldn't be offended by that. No, but you shouldn't just write that off, because like that's clearly like a child of color that you brought into your home that like you need to validate. You know what I mean? And like they would go on about like how people who people of color who like identify as people of color have like victimhood mentalities, and it's like America has been built off of a lot of discrimination and racism that hasn't just like gone away. Like they need to know that that's real. I mean, I have a lot more videos on this topic. I really kind of just want to wrap this up with, there are a lot of aspects to adoption, at least in my experience, that are great, that have really benefited me, but I don't like the idea that adoption is just overly idealized and like fantasized about, and that ignorant people can say to me, I've always wanted to adopt, without recognizing the complexities and nuances of what that statement means and what it carries. So that's why I make videos like this called Adoption Sucks, because as much as it's great, it's helped me out, I've had great experiences, just do your research into the fact that there is a whole other side of adoption that is horrible. And the fact that it's made out of trauma. Yeah, I just wish every person who makes a statement about wanting to adopt could like recognize that and carry the conversation with that sensitivity. But I find that most don't. that's all I have to say. My name is Rusanica. Like I said, I have a casual channel. Check out my videos. And I hope you have a good morning, afternoon, or night.